Welcome to the Maximizing Social Security Workshop. My name is Freeman Lindy, certified financial planner and host of the RetireMembership podcast. And today we are discussing how you can maximize Social Security. For many people, Social Security represents a massive portion of their retirement, and you can only claim it once. And once you make that decision, there's no going back. So for many people, when to claim Social Security represents the largest single decision that they will make in retirement. For much of the other planning, much of the strategies that we go through in retirement planning, you can make adjustments, you can change your course. But once you claim Social Security, there's no going back. And so we want to know, before we get there, how can we maximize our Social Security? And before we do anything that we can't take back or that we will regret. So buckle up. We're going to be covering a lot of information today on this workshop. And here's what we're going to be covering today. First of all, we want to understand Social Security. If you want to win the game of Social Security, you need to understand how the game is played. And so we'll be running through quickly just how it's calculated, what goes into claiming it, all those types of things. And that way you can understand kind of the foundation of where we're going to it. And then we're going to be looking at the factors for claiming Social Security. Obviously, I can't tell you specifically when you should claim it because it depends on many different factors. But you want to know what those factors are so that by the end of this workshop, hopefully you'll have a better idea or maybe a perfect idea of when you should claim Social Security. And then lastly, we want to look at some of the common strategies for claiming Social Security and how to maximize it. Before you go any further, you'll want to make sure you get the workbook. If you registered in advance for this workshop, then it would have been emailed to you probably today or whenever you signed up for it. And that way you just have that right there. If not, you can follow a link in the description of the video if you're watching this after the fact. And that'll take you right to a place where you can download that workbook. And what the workbook's going to do is it's going to help you follow along in the workshop and help you take more detailed notes. Anytime you see words underlined in the PowerPoint here, that's going to be your cue that you need to fill that bit in the workbook. So the workbook's going to have a bunch of blanks in it, and you can work your way through that. And by the end, you'll have a complete set of notes because we're going to cover a lot of information. You're not going to remember it all, but this is going to help you remember that. So make sure you get that workbook. It's absolutely free to retire members. If you registered again, you'll have that. Otherwise, you can pick that up before we go any further. If you are watching this after the fact, pause it now, get that workbook, and then play it again once you can have that and follow along. You can print it, fill it out by hand, or just fill it out. It's a fillable PDF. You can fill it out right there on your computer. Lastly, real quick, if you didn't find us through the podcast, if you're watching this after the fact and you found us on YouTube or something, I do have a podcast. It's called the RetireMembership Podcast. It's on all major platforms, and we release a new episode each week on Thursdays. And the whole point of the podcast is to help increase your knowledge of finances, just the relevant finances to you, right? Not all of the garbage out there, but just things that are relevant to you, to build your belief in financial planning and what being intentional with your money can actually do for you, and to inspire you to act on that plan and on those things that you're learning. So tune in. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and I hope you enjoy that as well. Lastly, a disclaimer here. This workshop is only for education, right? I'm not giving you direct investment advice. Even though I do this for a living, I'm not your financial planner, unless of course you are a client of mine. But so, it's all educational. This is not investment advice, and you can read the rest of the disclaimer there. But first, let's jump right into then our first topic, which is understanding Social Security. Again, if we want to win the game of Social Security, we need to understand how the game is played. So I'm going to run through some things here, and you can follow along in your workbook, and we'll get a good handle on exactly what we're doing here. So first, some key concepts and acronyms. Social Security, anytime you see SS in there, again, this will be on the workbook, and I just want to fill you in later on in the workshop or later on in the workbook, when you see some of these acronyms like that way, you can refer right to the beginning, see what those mean. Social Security, SS, that one makes sense. Primary insurance amount, or PIA. That is the amount that is of your monthly benefit for Social Security. Everything's monthly in Social Security terms, but it is the monthly benefit that you would get when you fully retire, and it's calculated based on all these things that we're going to talk about. And then you get the full amount of your PIA, your main PIA, at your full retirement age. And that's the age that you get your full PIA, 100% of that. For most people now, if you're born after 1960 or later, that's age 67 for you. But for some people, it was younger than that. We'll get to that. So just some acronyms. We'll see PIA, FRA, some of those in the future. So I want to throw those out there right away, have you know where those are coming from. So how do we get Social Security, right? Well, of course, we all pay FICA taxes. These are deducted automatically from our paychecks as employees. If you're self-employed, you pay self-employment tax, which is both sides. But essentially, 6.2% of your income is deducted from your paycheck anytime you earn anything. And your employer also contributes 6.2% as well. So really, 12.4% of your income goes towards Social Security. And that's a lot. And unlike federal income tax or state income tax, where you can get a lot of credits and deductions, there's a lot of Americans that don't pay any federal income tax at all because they're able to deduct it all away or credit it all away. Everyone always pays the same amount, 6.2% plus from the employer. They pay it all on all their income up to the taxable wage base, which we'll get to later on. So it's a big deal. A lot of your income is going. You think about like the golden rule of saving 15% or more towards retirement. You're already in some ways saving 12.4% towards that because your employer could be paying you that extra 6.2 if they didn't have to pay it for you. So there's a lot of your income over a lot of your life is going towards Social Security. And so this is a big deal. We need to take it seriously and we need to understand how we can maximize that. So how do they calculate Social Security? So how they calculate how much you pay into it. That's easy. It's just 6.2. And then how do they calculate your benefit? Well, they take your highest 35 years of inflation-adjusted earnings, and they call that the average indexed monthly earnings, right? Or AIM. And so what they'll do is they'll look back at all your earnings. So we'll look at an example here. Let's say that your earnings looked something like this, and most of us, especially if you have 40 years of work history like this example does, you made way less 30, 35, 40 years ago than you did now, right? Just it's way less. So most people's work records are going to look something like this. You've mostly gotten raises over your whole life. You think back to your first real job when you got out of school or when you graduated high school, whatever it was. You think about how much you made on an hourly or annual basis then compared to how much you're making now towards the end. They're just miles apart, right? And so a lot of that's just inflation. And so if they only took it based on your highest 35 years and didn't adjust for inflation, for most people it would just be the last 35 years, right? Because these years way back when we're always going to be the smallest. But what they decided to do then is to adjust those for inflation. And so they apply a factor to it, and that's going to raise them all up to be much closer. So in this person's case, they mostly just got inflation raises over time. They didn't get any massive promotions. Look, they had a little dip somewhere in there in which they made a little bit less. And so when they adjust all these for inflation, before they were just taking the first 5 years out, and it was the last 35 years. But now, because there was a dip in there, now they're actually going to lose some of those years, pick up a few earlier, and so depending on, if you work different jobs, you took a lower paying job at some other time, you may not be the last 35 years you work because it's always going to be the highest after they adjust for inflation. And so what they really do is they adjust it all up, they just add it all up, and then they take the average, 35 years or 12 months of 35 years, right? And they divide it by that, and that gives you your average index monthly earnings. So in this case, 4,635. And so they take that and then they apply this replacement factor. So how much of that average monthly earnings are they trying to replace? So Social Security is designed to replace a portion of your income in retirement. It's not designed to provide an entire retirement income, right? And so how do they do that? Well, there's a few what they call bend points. And so they apply a different replacement factor to different amounts of income. So on the first $1,000 that you make per month, they're trying to replace 90% of that. So if you worked your whole life only making $1,000 a month, you would get $900 a month in Social Security, and you'd have 90% of your income replaced. But then for the next $5,000 of income that you make, up to about $6,000 total. These are 2022 numbers. They adjust every year with inflation. But basically the next $5,000 or $6,000 total, they're trying to replace 32% of that money. And then beyond that, then an additional $6,000 worth of income, they're only trying to replace 15% of that additional income. And so if we looked at someone, and then that's capped, and right now for 2022, it's capped at $147,000. So if you as an individual, right, if you're married, you probably file taxes jointly, and so you have household income for federal taxes. But again, Social Security is always on an individual basis. And so if your individual income is higher than $147,000, you only pay taxes on that $147,000 or Social Security taxes. And then anything over that, you just don't pay the taxes and it doesn't credit you in your Social Security at all. So if we look at someone, let's say that on average over time, they'd always maxed out, they'd always made more than the maximum amount of Social Security. And so their average index monthly earnings was $12,250 in 2022, the highest it can be. Well, it's going to replace 90% of that first $1,000 or $900. Then it's going to replace 32% of that next $5,000 or $1,600, and then only 15% of that last $6,000 or $35. I didn't write it on there, but the total is $3,500 basically that they would get for Social Security. But then if we look at the example we had before with someone of $4,635, right, still the same 90% of the first, then they'll do 32% of the next $3,600. And then that accounts for all $4,600 that they made. So they never get into that last kind of threshold there. And so what you'll notice is that the person on your right there, they made $4,600 a month. They made about a third of what the person on the left made, right? But the person on the left, even though they made 3 times more in income and paid 3 times more in Social Security taxes, they don't even have twice as much in benefit because of how it's credited. And so Social Security is heavily skewed towards the first part of your income that you make, and the more income you make, the less and less of it counts towards Social Security. And so for people who wonder, hey, in the future, are they gonna eliminate this for people who earn higher? Are they gonna have some kind of income test where then you phase out and you can't get Social Security anymore? Probably not, because it's already heavily weighted. It's already means tested, and it's already heavily weighted against those who make higher incomes. You got your PIA there, that's your primary insurance amount. So this is how much you would get at your full retirement age, then whatever that is. So what is your full retirement age? Well, again, your primary insurance amount is the amount you get at full retirement age. And for anyone born 1960 or after, your full retirement age is 67. Okay, it used to be 65 way back in the day, and then they went to 66, and then they went to 67. And so if you were born in any of these years, that's your full retirement age. That's phase out where they would add 2 months for it every year to get from 66 up to 67. If you were born between 1943 and 1954, then it would have been 66, and anyone before that was 65. But nobody born before that is probably watching this, so we'll just forget about that for now. So that's your full retirement age, and you can claim it earlier or later than that, but that's what the full benefit is calculated on. And so, the earliest you can claim Social Security then is 62. So your full retirement age, we're just going to use 67 as the example moving forward, since again, everyone, basically, if you're not 62 now in 2022, then you're going to be 62 anytime after that, and your full retirement age will be 67. But 62 is the earliest you can claim it, and your benefits will be reduced from that full retirement amount if you claim it early. You can also wait after age 70 or after age 67 and wait all the way up till age 70, and your benefits will be increased for each month that you wait after your full retirement age. And it does prorate monthly, and so we'll use a lot of different years here, but really any month that you wait, the longer you wait, the higher your benefit will be. And so what does that look like? Well, at age 67 or whatever your full retirement age, somewhere in here, you get 100% of your primary insurance amount, whatever that was calculated. And then if you take it earlier than that, you basically lose like 6 2/3% for the first 3 years and then 5% after that. So if you take it all the way up at 62, you're losing 30% of your benefit. And so you'd get 70% of whatever your primary insurance amount would be. And if you wait longer, it's going to increase by 8%, simple compounding, for each year after that. So you get 108% if you waited a year, 116, and then 124 if you waited all the way until age 70. You cannot claim it earlier than 62, and there's no benefit to waiting until after 70. It doesn't grow any more than that. So you definitely want to claim before that. Some people, just real quick, want to hit on this. Some people wonder, will Social Security even be around when I retire. Maybe you're pretty far off from 62, and you're just trying to look ahead here, and will this even exist? Or we're going to have massive benefits? Well, I did a whole podcast on it. It just actually came out last week, and so if you want to look that up, the question was basically, will Social Security exist when I retire, and what are some of the problems with Social Security, the funding problems that they're having, and what are some of the possible solutions for fixing that? And so you can go back, find that episode. You can also go to retirementorship.com/84, and it'll bring you right to that episode. And so if you want a little bit more bonus material on this material, we don't have enough time to get into all that today, so you can go listen to that if you're curious. If you've ever wondered if what's going to happen with Social Security, that would be a good one to listen to. So we kind of know how it works, right? We know how it's calculated. We know when you have to claim it and what your ages are. So what are the factors that would be involved for claiming Social Security? Well, there's several of them. And basically what we want to look at today is your life expectancy. That's going to determine when you should, or that's going to influence when you should claim Social Security. Your high 35 years of income, the return on any other assets that you have for retirement, the market cycle, where the stock market is right now, depending on when you're trying to claim it, and taxes. Taxes impact everything, right? It's one of the sure things in life. And any spouse's benefits. If you're married or were married, then you have a spousal or spouse's benefits that you have to consider as well. So those are all the factors that are going to go into when you should take Social Security. And obviously that's a lot. So let's talk about each one a little bit in turn. And then again, we'll look at some strategies at the end for how you might combine some of these things into your particular strategy. So first, let's look at life expectancy. So obviously, if you take it at your full retirement age, you're going to get X amount per month every month, and that's going to inflate. And so what we're going to look at here is a chart without inflation. Let's just take inflation out of it to make it more simple. And so if you wait all the way to full retirement age, you get a certain amount, and that's going to accumulate over time, right? And if you take it earlier, you get a smaller amount, right? If you take it all the way at 62, you're going to get 30% less, but you also get it 5 years earlier if your full retirement age is 67. And if you wait, you get more each month, but you also get it, 3 years later. And so they're gonna the pitches at how fast it's gonna accumulate over time varies based on when you take it. But essentially, you can basically find out, hey, well, when's the break even? When do all these things, when will I have accumulated the same amount of total Social Security based on when I take it? And where that basically breaks even is in that 79 to 80 years age or older. And so one of the things that some people look at and is whether or not they should take it early. And of course, like if you need, and your total retirement planning, if you need to work longer and you're working beyond 62 and you're working until 65 or 67 or 70, obviously those will impact when you take it, probably more than just a standalone Social Security calculation, right? You can't just retire at 62 just because you can take Social Security. Then you got to figure out, is that and everything else you have going to be enough income to live off of? But for people who can retire before 62, then the question becomes like, do we go ahead and take it right away at 62, or do we wait and live off of other assets while we wait for our Social Security to get bigger? And your life expectancy will have some impact on that, but not as much as people think, because you've probably heard like, well, if you expect to live longer, then you should, take it earlier, right? Because like you see this, like, hey, if you're going to live below, if you don't think you're going to live till 79 or 80, then you should take it earlier, because the pitches, the amount that you'll get starting at age 62 is higher all the way until it breaks even out there. So the earlier you can take it, you should. And maybe the only reason you take it at 64 instead of 62 is because you have to work till 64. Or maybe you have to work till 65 to get Medicare for insurance reasons, and then you would take it as soon as you could at that point, right? And because all of those, you're going to have more over time if your life expectancy is less than 79 or 80. But if you think you'll live longer than that, then cumulatively, you'll gain a lot more if you wait and take it later. Because again, you'll have more every month. You're waiting longer to get it, but it's going to grow a lot faster to get there. And so if you go take a standalone, like if you go into and you find a online Social Security calculator, they'll ask you some questions, and part of it will be like, how long do you think you'll live? And if you think you'll live a long time, then they're usually going to pump out, well, you should wait to take Social Security. But the problem is, again, this is looking at it in a vacuum here. And if let's say you retired at 62 and you're just wondering when you should take it along the way, really, you're digging yourself in a hole by waiting. Because if you don't take it at 62 and you're waiting all the way to 67 or 70, you are withdrawing money from other places. And if you had taken it right away, you wouldn't have to pull as much money out of those places. So really, when you start looking at that, if you start it later, you're basically digging yourself out of a hole compared to what you would have if you took it right at 62. And when you factor that in, again, this doesn't factor in inflation, but the inflation graph just curves, but it looks basically the same. Because you start off so much further behind by waiting, the actual break even from life expectancy is way far out there if you're actually taking all these things into account. And so for a lot of people, just on life expectancy, it doesn't really matter when you live. Like taking it earlier, assuming all other things are equal, or assuming you can retire based on the other things, may be better for a lot of people when you factor in just how much you're losing by waiting and how long that's going to take to make back not just what you lost, but then also catch up to where you would have been. And so, and that'll factor into the return on other assets in a little bit, which we'll get to. But for most people, for life expectancy, if you're retiring at or before age 62, the break even on that just standard life expectancy is 79 to 80. And so you'll want to consider claiming it earlier if you really don't think that you're going to live that long, or you're only going to live till about then. And if you expect you'll live way longer than that, then you would want to consider claiming it later. But really, it comes down to more, you'll want to consider maybe even retiring later so that you can have a bigger income overall. Because if you have to spend down other assets while you wait, then that's going to adjust the formula. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. So that's life expectancy. One of the other ones you want to look at is your high 35, right? It's based off of the highest 35 years of income. And so if you have not reached 35 years of income, then, or in your peak earning years, you'll want to consider working longer. And the reason is, let's say you only worked 30 years. Well, again, they're just adding all that up. And so if you have 5 years of income missing, your average monthly earnings is you could have had higher earning years in there. And so you might be foregoing potential benefits by not having a full 35 years of income. Or if you're at peak earning years, right, you're earning the most that you ever had, you got big promotions, big raises, all those things. You're not just making inflation raises. Then every year that you earn, you're going to increase your Social Security benefit because it's going to be at the higher end of that range. And so you might want to consider working longer. If you have 35 years of income already and you're earning less now, or you've only really received inflation raises over time, then you might not have to work longer because it's not going to do anything, right? If you already have a high 35 and now you're working at the end and those years are not higher than before, or they're about the same after they adjust for inflation, then you working longer is not increasing your benefit at all. It doesn't do anything to it. And so there's not an incentive then to continue working and continuing to add that. Obviously, there are other incentives to working longer. And one of those, or there's three essential benefits for working longer in general when it comes to retirement planning. One is you have one more, for each year that you work longer, you have 1 year of additional income, right? And so that helps when you're earning more money. That helps the overall pot. You also have 1 more year for all your other assets to grow. Any 401ks, Roth IRAs, those types of investments that you have will all get to grow 1 more year before you have to start pulling money out of them. And number 3, you have 1 less years of withdrawals, right? You're going to pass away when you're going to pass away, whenever that is. And if you worked 1 extra year, that's 1 less year on the back end that you will need to fund with other assets. So that's 3 big examples. So let me show you an example here. And we use this software in our financial planning firm called eMoney. It's very popular among kind of more advanced financial planners and whatnot. There's some more simpler softwares out there, but this is the big one for a lot of people. And this is what it looks like. We'll have it up kind of behind me here. But you put someone in, this is obviously a fake client, and it'll show you an overview of everything they have. And what this allows us to do is it really allows us to put in a whole bunch of base facts, everything that they have going on. And after we do all those factors, and it's calculating their tax rates, their investment returns based on what's done in the past, the different volatility there, different rates of return, their debt payments, when those run out, when the tax rates change, all these things, it's calculating all that. And it'll kick out a base plan. And it says, hey, if we did nothing and you kept living the way that you're living now and kept doing the same things, we can kind of see, hey, this is what would likely happen to your assets over time. So, it grows up and then they retire and then they spend it down and they run out at age 88. And you can see that at age 88, they have, $400,000 left. And so they might look at that and be like, well, we don't really know if we're going to live any longer than that. So, that looks good to us. 200,000 is not bad. But this is all future dollars, and this doesn't take into account inflation. And so we can actually adjust for that too and say, well, what would that look like if we adjust it for inflation? And suddenly that $400,000 becomes $200,000, and it's really not that much. And you might be wondering, well, am I going to slide into home plate with nothing left in the bank, right? And do I really want to race against time and say, hey, what's going to run out first, my time in this earth or the balances in my accounts? That's not really maybe a race that you want to run. And so maybe you want to make sure that you just have more padding at the end, or that it will last longer. Because what if you live a little bit longer than 88, or what if things don't go quite as well? Well, we can then illustrate what is the impact of working longer. And so we can say, hey, what if you work just 1 year longer? And you got those three benefits, right? 1 more year of income, 1 less year of withdrawals, and 1 more year for all of your benefits or your assets to grow. And so if we change it by 1 year, we see we have a $460,000 gain in everything that we're trying to do. And if we work for 2 more years, that goes up to $900,000 more in the end, just by working a little bit longer because of those 3 effects. So obviously that lever of when you retire and how much longer you work has massive impacts on your overall retirement. And so you might wait to, even though in general it's better to claim it earlier, because with everything else that goes on, especially if you have retired earlier, you will get more out of it if you claim it right away. But if you need to work, right, there's obviously huge benefits in securing your retirement if you work longer. So that's a balance that you'll need to play in your overall retirement planning. So one of the other the aspects of this that we need to look at is your return on assets. What are you earning on your other accounts? And that's the thing, right? Social Security can't be calculated in a vacuum. And if you do that, if you go online and you find a Social Security calculator and you put in some numbers, it'll kick out when you should take it, but it's not taking into account anything else. Like, what do you have in your 401ks? What do you have in your Roth IRAs? What's your tax bracket? What's all these different aspects? And it all connects. And so Social Security cannot and must not be calculated in a vacuum. We want to see, hey, what is the rest of our assets doing? So the general rule is that if the growth rate on everything else you have, 401ks, Roth IRAs, all that, is less than 5 to 7%, you could consider delaying your claim, right? Because if you take it all the way back from the back, it kind of grows by, if you take it 62, or if you wait, it kind of grows by 5% a year, and then 6% a year, all the way up to full retirement, and then 8% a year after that. And that's all simple. It's not compound, which is very important. But, if all your assets are in CDs and fixed annuities and all this other fixed income garbage, and it's all earning, 1, 2, 3, 4% on that, then, hey, you're better off waiting and spending down money that you're only making 3, 4% on, and letting your Social Security income grow by 5, 6, or 8% in the meantime. And so if your growth rates are really low on everything, you should consider delaying your claim and letting your Social Security build up to a higher amount. However, if your benefits are more than 8%, then there's no point in spending down assets that are earning more than 8% per year so that you can grow your Social Security by 5, 6, or even 8%, right? Like that's not good math. And so if it's more than 8%, then you should consider advancing your claim, right? Taking it as early as you can. And if you're somewhere in the middle there, if you're at 7, 8%, then you need to do a more detailed analysis of like, hey, what's better, to spend down money that I'm earning 6 or 7% on, or to so I can let my Social Security grow by 6 or 7, or do the opposite. And that's where some of these other factors are going to come into play. So again, let's go back to another example here on eMoney. And so here was the base plan for this example couple. And their plan was to take Social Security at 70. They had heard that, hey, if you wait till 70, you can get the most out of Social Security, right? It'll give you the highest income, and it's going to be the most secure. And so they came in and they said, hey, we're going to wait until age 70 to take it. And so that's what's programmed in here by default. And if we look at the income, where they're getting their income from, you see that they're earning a salary for a bit. Then there's this huge gap where they're just living off withdrawals out of their other retirement accounts. And then their Social Security kicks in a little bit later and takes up a portion of that. And so there's that large gap there where they're living 100% on withdrawals from their accounts while they let their Social Security grow. And so we can change that though and say, well, hey, let's optimize Social Security. Let's take it earlier. Let's see what would happen if we did that. And so we take it a little bit earlier. We see the Social Security move up, and now there's a smaller gap there because they're taking a little bit earlier than they originally planned to. And then we can go back and see, hey, what's the long-term effect on their assets? And what we see is that we're going to have more earlier, right? That their assets last longer because they're not pulling as much out of them in those early years because of, they got Social Security to help offset what they need to withdraw from. But then down the road, it's less. It's more earlier and less later. And because they're not getting as much from Social Security. And so they need to be pulling more out of their accounts down the road. And for them, at least at this point, taking Social Security earlier than 70 would be worse for them, right? And so they should take it as late as possible. But what if we do other things, right? So what if they go through a financial plan and they change their investments before and after retirement because they learn about 3D retirement income. And so they decide to adopt that model and it's a little bit better for them. And they change their HSAs and their Roth IRAs and they had an annuity that they make some adjustments to. And they do all this, they do genuine financial and retirement planning. And now they're obviously much better off overall. Like they've done planning and it made a big impact and it should make a big impact over their whole life. Now let's go back and adjust Social Security again. So we switch it back to 70. Now let's bring it back up earlier. Well, when we make that switch now, it does actually have now a positive adjustment. So it was much worse before to take it earlier, but now it's actually better to take it earlier. And that's kind of my point, right? Like it depends on what else you have. You can't calculate Social Security in a vacuum. If you have it, depending on what else you do with the rest of your retirement planning will dictate or at least heavily influence when you take Social Security. And so for us, when we do retirement planning, we calculate a lot of these other things. We develop our other strategies first and then take Social Security based on some of those other retirement planning components. And so that's just a good example of that. Also, you heard me mention 3D retirement income in there as a model for retirement. I've wrote a book on that. You can pick that up. It's free to all RetireMembers. It's our free membership community, which you can sign up for at RetireMembership.com. There's also a link in the description. If you haven't heard of that, again, you're just finding this after the fact on YouTube or whatever. It's also available on Amazon for purchase, but again, you can get that for free just by signing up for our membership community. And that walks through the whole thing. We also did a workshop on investing before and after retirement last month. That's available on the YouTube channel or at our website, RetireMembership.com. That'll kind of give you the 1 hour kind of brief overview of that, and then you can read the book for more detailed understanding of what I'm talking about with that 3D retirement income. As you can see, it makes a big impact on what people do in their overall financial plan to be able to adopt this strategy. And so just wanted to, if you didn't know what that was, that's what we're referring to there. So you can't calculate your Social Security in a vacuum. You must look at everything else that we're doing. One of those things might be the market cycle. So another factor may be where the market is right when you're trying to claim. So where you are in a market cycle may impact your timing, right? If the market is high, and here's basically what it is, right? If you're invested in the market and you have a lot in equities and you've invested a lot in buying the best businesses in the world, and the market's high, like exceptionally high, you've had a few years of 15, 17, 20% returns right before you're going to retire and take Social Security. You're like, well, I know that I believe that the long-term return of equities is 10%, and it's done way better than that the last few years. I know it's going to keep doing really well over time, but probably we don't know about the short term. With how high it's been the last few years, it may continue to go up. It may just languish for a while. It doesn't necessarily have to go down. We don't really know. But hey, let's siphon off some of these extra gains and live purely off all these high gains that we've gotten in our retirement investments. Let's just live off those and let's delay taking Social Security for a little bit longer so that if doesn't necessarily will, but if the market does go down, then we can take Social Security at that point, which kind of leads to the other point, which is if the market's really low or lower than you have, maybe you don't want to be pulling money out of your accounts when they're low, right? We don't sell when they're down. And so maybe you would plan to wait a little bit to take Social Security, but then the market drops off and we decide to take it earlier so that we don't have to pull as much out of our accounts and can make sure that we're never having to sell when it's low. So you're going to have a time, like when you do a financial plan, a retirement plan, you do pick a time that as of right now and everything that you see right now would be the optimal time to take it. But then you may adjust that based on where the market cycle is leading up to and when you hit that point. Either you might delay it or advance it based on what the market's doing. And then we do have, of course, taxes. Taxes impact everything we do. And Social Security benefits are taxable, or they might be taxable. And whether or not they're taxed is based on your provisional income, which is basically they take your adjusted gross income, any non-taxable income that you wrote off for federal income tax purposes, so like municipal bonds, those types of things, and then you add in half of your Social Security benefit. And if it's, depending on where it is in this table, right, these are 2022 numbers, these numbers adjust each year, but if you're married, filing jointly, and all that, half your Social Security plus everything else you're doing is less than $32,000, then none of your Social Security is taxable. And if it's, if you make between $32,000 and $44,000, then 50% of it's going to be taxable. And if you make more than $44,000 a year, then 85% of it's going to be taxable. Again, you don't tax 85% of it, just 85% of it is added to your taxable income on your federal income taxes. And so how you're doing taxes may impact when you take Social Security. Because if you're on the lower end and you have a chance of not having your Social Security taxed, you might delay Social Security, do a bunch of Roth conversions to convert a lot of your income into tax-free dollars while you're at a lower income tax bracket, especially while, brackets are as low as they've ever been and they are likely to go up in the future. So you might be, in all your tax planning, you may have this awesome strategy to convert a lot of that income into tax-free income. And then you take Social Security later so that overall your total provisional income is lower than that threshold, and you go from paying a lot of taxes over your entire retirement to paying no taxes at all in retirement, or very little. So that might be that might be a reason to delay or take it earlier, depending on what your tax situation is. And if you didn't do that planning, or if you didn't do the tax planning part of retirement planning, then you're not going to know those things. And you might make a big error that's going to cause you to pay a lot of taxes on your Social Security for your whole life when you didn't have to. And so the tax planning piece is really, really important. And if you want to know more about taxes, our workshop next month in November is on reducing taxes in retirement. So it'll be on November 17th. Again, we release one of these every third Thursday of the month. It's at 6 p.m. Central Time if you want to catch it live, and you can register at retirementorship.com/workshops. So make sure that you tune into that, and make sure, because that's way beyond the course of this, but just know that for now, tax planning and what you're doing with your taxes would be a factor you need to consider for claiming Social Security. And then lastly, you have your spousal benefits. There's kind of two things about your spouse's benefit, which is if you both have your own benefits, like depending on what those benefits are, that's going to impact it. And then you also have spousal benefits. So let's talk about that one first. And so, anyone must have worked 40 hours or 40 quarters in order to be eligible for their own Social Security, right? For a quarter of a year. So basically, you have to have worked 10 years and paid Social Security taxes on income for 10 years. They don't have to be consecutive. That's why it's quarters. But if you earned over a certain amount in a quarter, then that quarter counts. And as long as you have 40 of them, then you're eligible for your own benefit. But if you didn't work at all, or you worked very little, you can also be eligible for a spousal benefit. And you can claim benefits based on your spouse's income instead of your own. So maybe, if you were a stay-at-home mom, or have been a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home parent, and you were in a family where one person worked their whole life and did that, and the other one stayed home and raised kids and did whatever else, and didn't have 40 quarters of their own, or did, but it was very low and they don't have a lot of their own income. They can claim Social Security based on what the main worker did. And so from now on, we're going to call the person who earned a lot of money and has a higher benefit, we're going to call them the worker, and we're going to call the other one that maybe had very low benefits or no benefits at all the spouse. And so the spousal benefit is 50% of the worker's primary insurance amount at the spouse's full retirement age, right? So the spousal benefit is 50% of the worker's primary insurance amount, or PIA, at the spouse's full retirement age. And we'll get to what that means in a second. But just real quick, a spouse can get the larger of their benefit or the spousal benefit. So if they did have their own benefit and it's higher, you're just going to claim your own. If your benefit's higher than your spouse's, then half of your spouse's, then you would just claim your own, obviously. But maybe again, they were home for a long time. They don't have a lot of work history, but they did earn their own benefits. And let's say that the worker has, their benefit's going to be $3,000 a month, and the spouse does have earnings, but their benefit's going to be $1,000 a month. Well, half of $3,000 is $1,500. And so you would take the spousal benefit, or $1,500, instead of your own. You can take whichever one is higher, which is a really nice feature. And so in order to get the spousal benefit, the worker must have claimed Social Security for the spouse to be entitled. right? You can't get the spousal benefit and the worker's still working and still accumulating. So the worker needs to be retired and officially have claimed they don't have to be retired, I guess, but they have to have claimed their Social Security in order for the spouse to get the spousal benefit. But it doesn't matter when the worker claims. So if the worker claims at 62, 67, or 70, doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the spousal benefit, right? It affects their own, right? Depending on where they claim, you're going to get higher or lower, but it doesn't affect the spousal benefit. It's always based on the worker's primary insurance amount. But the spousal benefit is reduced if the spouse claims before their full retirement age. Not the workers, but their own full retirement age, right? So if both of them have their full retirement age is 67 and the worker claims at 62, but the spouse waits all the way up until her own 67 or his own 67, then he's going to get the full amount. But if the spouse also retires at 62, then they're going to get it reduced as well. And so the way that looks then, right, is the most you can get as a spousal benefit is 50% of the worker's benefit. And that would be at your full retirement age, or 67. If you take it earlier, you're going to get less and less, all the way to the point where if the spouse takes the spousal benefit at their age 62, right, they're going to get 32.5% of the worker's primary insurance amount. But they cannot get any benefits for waiting longer. And so if they wait beyond 67 to take it, then it's not growing at all. And that's going to matter because maybe the worker was planning to wait until 70 to take their benefits. Well, theirs might keep growing until age 70, but especially if they're the same age as the spouse, right? If they're both the same age and they hit 67, but the worker's planning to keep working to raise their own benefit, they just got to know that the spousal benefit's not raising any higher than that, right? We had the worker's benefit will do this, but the spousal benefit will do that. So that might impact when you're going to take it, right? Because maybe you plan to wait until 70, but you decide, the worker needs to have claimed theirs in order for the spouse to get the spousal benefit. So it might make the worker claim at 67 or whatever so that the spouse can claim and get there. And especially, if the spouse is older than the worker and they're going to hit their full retirement age before the worker hits theirs, then you got all these different issues, right? And so that's going to matter quite a bit and have a big impact on when you claim. You can also have a spousal benefit for a divorced spouse. So if you were married for 10 years, you have to have been married for them for 10 years. You can claim on your ex-spouse's Social Security benefits, just as you can if you are married, right? You must be currently unmarried to do that. And so if you you were married for at least 10 years and then you got divorced a while ago and you're still unmarried, you can claim spousal benefits against your spouse's earnings. And the ex-spouse does have to hit 62, but they don't have to have claimed, right? Because if you're now in separate households, before, if you're married, right, the worker has to have claimed in order for the spouse to get the spousal benefits. But if you're in separate households, obviously an ex-spouse can't tell their ex-spouse to claim so that they can get theirs. So they just say, they just have to have reached 62, but they do not yet have to have claimed. And then they can claim against it. If you've gotten remarried, if you were divorced, you were married for 10 years and then you got divorced, but then you got remarried, you can no longer get a spousal benefit based on your ex-spouse's earnings, right? Because now you're married, so now you get a spousal benefit based on your current spouse's earnings. If you got divorced twice or 3 times, right, as long as they were all 10 years, then you can pick one of them to claim against. Obviously, you'd pick the highest one, but you can't claim against all of them and get spousal benefits from all of them, only on one. So there's a spousal benefit even for divorced people. And then we get into survivor benefits for surviving spouses, right? And this can be either thing, right? Either spouses that pass away in retirement after you've been retired for a while and you both claim for a while, or it can be when your spouse passes away prematurely, like before retirement or before they claim. There's kind of two versions of the survivor benefit. And so obviously the worker must be deceased in order to get a survivor benefit. And you must have been married for at least 9 months before death. So you can't, find someone who's going to have an awesome, fat Social Security benefit and get married to them on their death benefit or on their deathbed just to get the survivor benefit. Doesn't work. Have to be married for at least 9 months before death. And you must be unmarried or be remarried after age 60. So if you were married before they passed away and you were in your 50s, you have to remain unmarried all the way up until you hit 60. And then you can get remarried in retirement and still get a survivor benefit, but not if you get remarried before then. So there's a couple little, caveats on that. But then the way that this works is the spouse can be entitled to the survivor benefit based on 100% of the working spouse's benefit or their primary insurance amount if it's not yet claimed. So if it's earlier, right, if the worker passed away before they reached their full retirement age, right, then the survivor benefit is going to be based on that primary insurance amount because it was never claimed yet, right? But if they had already claimed it and you're working, so someone that passes away at 75 or something, then the survivor is entitled to 100% of that worker's benefit, whatever they did. So if they claimed it early at 62, it doesn't now get adjusted to their primary insurance amount. It's still going to be based on that 62 amount. If they delayed and took it at 70, it's now going to be based on that delayed credit they got by waiting until 70. So if you've already taken it, then the survivor benefit is based on the benefit. If they haven't claimed it yet, then it's based on the primary insurance amount. Okay. Your survivor benefit does get reduced based on the survivor's age. So if you claim it early, right? If your spouse passed away before claiming, say they passed away at 60, they can claim that early. They don't have to wait until their full retirement, but just like spousal benefit, it will get reduced if they claim it earlier. You can actually take it as early as 60. This is the only time you can take it before 62. So say you're married for 10 years, worker passed away at 55, you can take a survivor benefit from them at age 60 as long as you haven't been remarried. It's going to keep reducing if you take it, it's 5% each year before 62 as well, so you're going to lose another 10%. And so you're only going to get 60% of the benefit if you do that, but you can take it as early as age 60. And of course, the survivor will get the larger of either their own benefit or the survivor benefit. And so again, if your spouse passed away before claiming, if there's some strategy in there, right? Do you take the survivor benefit right away at 60 or 62, something like that, and let yours delay and take as long as possible to grow and get as big, and then take your own at 70, right? And then so you can have one of those because you can't have both. You can either take yours or the survivor benefit. And so you might, there's some strategy in there for how you'd want to take that. Or maybe you take your own at 62 and you let the survivor benefit continue to grow, and you wait until 70 to take that. And so it's based on, you get a high. So really depends on the situation for what's going to be the best there. And that's important because, a lot of people think like, I don't think I'm going to live past 80. That'd be a miracle if I made it till 80 or whatever that number is, right? And basically what this chart shows is that there's a 50% chance that both people will be alive at age 79, 80, right? That both of them will be alive because that's maybe how long you think that you're going to live. But there's a 50% chance that one of them will still be alive at age, what would that be, 89, 90. Right, so the chances of, yes, that you have your own individual life expectancies, but the joint life expectancy, the chance that at least one of you will still be alive into your late 80s is much higher than you both will be. And so there's a pretty good chance that one spouse will live, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 years longer than the other. And you only get one benefit. You can take yours if it's higher, or you can take the survivor benefit, the spousal benefit, if that one's higher. And so there's some strategy there of like, do we delay one to make it as big as possible so that if one of us passes away, we get a much larger benefit that we get to keep and all these different things. And so, depending on what the spousal situation is, whether you're divorced, whether you're still married, whether one has a really high one or not, or they're both high, all of that's going to be big, big factors in when you take Social Security. Probably the largest. I think I saved the biggest factor till the end. And so lastly then, let's get into what are strategies for claiming Social Security. What do we actually do with all this information? We know all the factors. How do we put those together in an actual strategy? So one of the things that we just alluded to there is there's a strategy of where you delay the larger spouse. And this is best for uneven incomes, right? You had one income that was really high and one income that was lower. And so you might want to, but still their own incomes. We're not talking about spousal. We're just saying, maybe again, one is 3,000 and one is going to be 1,600. And so half of it, half of the main one is 1,500. So that's less than their own benefit. So you're still talking about taking your own benefits, but maybe one's way higher than the other. what you might do, and again, this is mostly going to apply if you're both going to retire at 60, 62, whatever, and you're just trying to figure out when you take the Social Securities, it may be that you claim the smaller benefit right away to start getting some of that income, and you delay the larger one as long as possible to really build that thing up. So maybe it was $3,000 at full retirement age, and that's going to grow by another 24% by age 70. And so you get a much higher one. So maybe you take, again, $1,600 at full retirement age. So you're going to take that one earlier, take a 30% cut. So that'd be, $1,200, but you get $1,200 for 8 years longer at 62, and instead of waiting all the way till 70. But then at 70, you get one that used to be 3,000. That's now whatever that would be, 3,600, 4,000. I don't know. Not bad. Didn't do the math ahead of time. And so you get something right away, and you'll get both for a while. But then when one of you passes away, now you're getting a much bigger income that's going to stick with you. And when that $1,200 income goes away, that's not as big of a hit to the long-term calculation. So if you've got, really uneven incomes, you might delay the larger spouse, and especially if you also think that there's going to be a difference in life expectancy. If you think one spouse is going to vastly outlive the other, then you might really want to make sure you have a big income stream that person can live off of. And those benefits, of course, mean that you can enjoy some of that income immediately. You're getting the small one right away. You can grow that larger income even longer before you take it, and of course, maximize that survivor benefit. So that's a strategy that works really well in some cases. Another strategy would be to maximize the spousal benefit. So again, that one is you both have your own benefits that you would claim, just a matter of when. But what about if you've got one where you've got the main worker benefit and the spousal, maybe the spouse doesn't have any, or the spousal benefit is going to be bigger than their own. So then you want to calculate what's the optimal claiming ages for that. Again, just based on the fact that the worker has to have claimed, but then it's also going to depend on the spouse's age for what they get. So ideally, you'd claim when the spouse hits their full retirement age, because if they claim any later than that, it doesn't get any bigger than that. But of course, it has to have made sense for the worker to have claimed by that point in order to do that. And so it's just a calculation. You can do the calculation if you know how, but that is one strategy to really make sure that you're maximizing that spousal benefit. You might want to optimize for life expectancy, right? If you're really healthy, and you're talking really healthy, like, hey, we think we're both going to last at least till 85, 90, and one of us might last to 100. Well, that's a long time to live, right? If you think you might live to 100, like claiming at 62, even retiring at 62, you better have a pretty good retirement plan. Well, obviously a lot of money saved to be able to live for 38 years off of that income, right? Especially if you worked 40 and you're retiring and trying to live another 38 years beyond that, you got to make sure that you're prepared for that. So if you're really healthy, you might want to delay to ensure that you've got that higher income that's lasting much longer. Or if you're unhealthy and you don't even know if you're going to make it till 79 or 80, you're obviously probably going to take both of them as early as possible. And you may even take them before you retire, just depending on what that life expectancy really is. And, if you have a history of premature death or a history of longevity in the family, that's obviously going to impact your life expectancy, and you'd claim according to that. So I think a lot of people, this isn't how they would calculate it because they're just kind of average life expectancy, but maybe you definitely know, hey, we're definitely going to live longer, or we probably won't based on all these things. That's, kind of the outliers of both of those two options would try to more optimize for life expectancy than these other bits. You can also try to then optimize for your overall retirement plan, right? Which is maybe you're heavier in fixed income, and you hate the market, you don't understand it, it's scary to you, you don't like seeing your money go up and down, you've bought into all the lies of the insurance companies and the banks that have convinced you to invest all your money into fixed income, and so you're very heavy in fixed income, and all that again is making 3-4% for you. Again, inflation right now is 8 or 9, so you're losing money on all of that. But even long term, if inflation remains at 2.5-3%, and you're only making 3 or 4% on your money, you're not earning anything. And that's a really big problem that I think a lot of people are underestimating, and a lot of people really feel like the main problem in retirement is the market going up and down, and they're not taking inflation as seriously as it needs to be. And that's a lot of what we cover again in that book, 3D Retirement Income. But let's say that's your reality. Your CDs, your bonds, your fixed annuities, you're all in fixed income. Well, you probably want to claim later then, based on that overall retirement plan, because you're probably not earning as much on your fixed income portfolio as your Social Security is by just delaying. Again, that 5% and then 6% and then 8%. You might even wait all the way out until age 70, again, depending on what your life expectancy is, but you may wait longer to take it because you're getting a better rate of return. You're better off spending all those low return assets, spending those down and letting your Social Security grow. But maybe you're heavier in equities. Like you really believe in the long-term resiliency of the markets and the best businesses in the world, and you're okay, and you've got help doing the ups and downs of the market and realizing those superior returns. Well, then you're probably going to want to claim Social Security earlier, because then why would we don't want to be spending down these great growth assets that are making, that are averaging 8, 9, 10% so that our Social Security can grow by 5%. That's just not good math. And so you'd claim earlier and based on where the market cycle is, again, because obviously if you're heavier in equities, the market cycle is going to matter even more. And so those two things are going to more heavily dictate when you would claim. Or taxes, right? Maybe, again, you've done your overall retirement plan, you've done some tax planning, you realize you got to do a bunch of conversions and all these things to make, to pay the least amount of taxes over your lifetime, which again, that's our workshop next month. But you might optimize then your Social Security based on your overall taxes and what you're doing there. So you'd optimize your Social Security based on the specific strategies that you're taking in your overall retirement planning. So there we have it, right? We've got just in the general parts, how Social Security works. We've got, what are the factors we need to consider and some of those main strategies. And so there's a caveat here, right? That there are many variables, many scenarios that we just don't have time to cover in here. So really consult a professional. There's an asterisk there. We'll get to that later about your specific situation, right? Because there's a lot here. And again, it's a big issue and it's a big decision. And if this is not enough information for you to be 100% confident on when you should take it, then you really should figure out an overall retirement plan. You should figure out all these other things so that you can make the best decision possible. And so I would just strongly encourage you, right, to get a retirement plan. Claiming Social Security is an irreversible decision. You can't go back on that. Once you take it, there's no take backsies. And so you want, and this is that asterisk on the professional, right? You need a fee-only fiduciary certified financial planner who can help you calculate all those variables. They're the ones that have the competence, that really have studied all these things, that know how they all interplay. And of course, being a fiduciary means that they have to work in your best interests. They can't go sell you stuff that you don't need. And if they're fee only, then they're not selling you commission-based things and all that, right? So we saw it in the example. I've got a screenshot of it here, right? That doing a retirement plan makes a huge impact in people's lives. And most people are much, much better off for doing it. And this is after any fees that you would pay that CFP. And so you got to be right about Social Security, and you should be sure. Be right and be sure about when you take Social Security. So if you want help doing this, and this is all maybe just a little overwhelming, hopefully it's helpful, but maybe it's like, yeah, man, there's a lot to take in Social Security, because there is, right? That's why it takes us, hundreds of hours to learn all these things and hundreds of hours of working with clients to be able to be a CFP. But again, you want that fee-only fiduciary certified financial planner. Those are the three things you want, right? Fee-only, no commissions, only advice. They're not selling you products and stuff that you don't really need and walking away with a huge wad of cash in their pocket. A fiduciary means they have to act in your best interests. They cannot recommend something that's better for them because it pays them more if it's worse for you. It has to be in your best interest. And the CFP is just the certified financial planner. It's the gold standard of financial planning competence in the whole industry. So if you want to find someone who's got those, the easiest place to do that is feeonlynetwork.com. Feeonlynetwork.com. All the advisors on there have to be certified financial planners, have to be fiduciaries, and have to be fee only, right? So after that, you can pick and say like what style do you like, proximity, all those other things, but they will all have those three things for sure. And so that really helps you filter out all the sales professionals out there and the people that pretend like they know what they're talking about, but really don't. So it's a great place to do it. Or of course, if you want to work with us, you can go to laxfp.com. RetireMembership is my educational company. That's where we want to just do all this education that we can. My financial planning firm is Lacrosse Financial Planning, or laxfp.com. Getting links in the descriptions for all these things here as well. So if you like kind of the way that we do things and the things that we talk about, you're certainly welcome to work with us. But if you don't work with us, then I would highly encourage you, even if you have an advisor, if they're not a fee-only fiduciary CFP, go to feeonlynetwork.com and at least interview a few other ones to see. It's too important to get that get that wrong. You can check out more of what we have at RetireMentorship.com. Again, we're here to be your mentor to and through retirement so that you can retire successfully and stay successfully retired. So we've got the podcasts on there. We've got workshops. We've got all kinds of resources on there. It continues to build more and more. So if you've been there before, but not for a long time, come back, check it out again in the future because we're continuing to add to it as we have time and capacity. We'd also love for you to connect with us, right? You can email us any questions on this topic or anything else, any suggestions you have for the show. You can email us at questions@retirementorship.com. Become a Retire Member again. It's a free membership community, additional content, live events, all these things. And of course, listen to the podcast. It comes out every week. Maybe you're not interested enough in finances to listen every week, but just check it out each week and just listen to the ones that really catch your eye. That would be interesting for you. Thanks for investing this time with us. Your time is important. Our time is important. And hopefully it's been a good investment for you to invest in your education around this crucially important topic of Social Security. And if you enjoyed this content and you're watching this on YouTube, just ask that you like the video down below. You can always subscribe too if you want. That way you'll get notified. It'll get queued up for you when we release additional content down the road. All of our podcasts are now in video format. So if you'd rather watch them than just listen to them, those are all available on the YouTubes as well. And if you really enjoyed this and you know someone else who's approaching claiming Social Security and you're like, hey man, just to make sure that you check this out, right? Send them a link to this video. Send them a link to this video on YouTube. If you're watching this live, find it afterwards. So that'd be a huge help to them, and it would help us to reach more people and spread these important educational messages. So again, thanks for investing this time. We've got lots more coming out for you. Stay in touch, be part of the community, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next one. Cheers.